The second time I heard the rumor about myself, I did not defend myself. That was how I knew I had really come back. Not because my phone said Thursday, October 24th, not because I was wearing the navy skirt I had thrown away 10 years ago, not because the cracked mirror in the girls' bathroom still had the same silver scar down the corner, like lightning trapped under glass. I knew because Tessa Ward leaned against the sink beside me, pretending to fix her lip gloss, and said, "People are saying you told the counselor Maya faked her panic attack for attention," and my first instinct was not to cry, explain, plead, or run to every girl in year 11 begging them to remember I had never once used someone's pain as gossip. My first instinct was to look at my reflection, smooth one loose strand of hair behind my ear, and ask, "Who told you that?" Tessa blinked. In my first life, that sentence had come out as a sob. I had grabbed her arm and said, "That's not true. You know I would never." And by lunchtime my desperation had become part of the rumor. Mara's spiraling. Mara's scared because she got caught. Mara cried because she knows she said it. By the end of that first Thursday, I was not just accused of mocking Maya's panic attack. I was accused of being the counselor's informant, of repeating private disclosures from well-being sessions, of reporting a party I had not attended, of telling teachers which girls self-harmed, which boys drank, which students cheated, which parents were divorcing. None of it was true. All of it stuck. In the first life, the rumor did not explode like a bomb. It spread like mold, quiet and damp, into every friendship I had. People stopped talking when I approached. Maya would not look at me. My best friend Juniper asked, "Just tell me which parts are true," and something in me cracked so badly I never fully repaired it. But now I was back, standing at the sinks before homeroom, watching Tessa wait for panic. I gave her curiosity instead. "Who told you?" I repeated. Her lip gloss wand hovered in the air. "Everyone." I smiled softly. Perfect. Tessa did not know what to do with that. Rumors are supposed to make the target frantic. The whole machine depends on it. The accused girl runs from person to person, gathering fragments, contradicting one version while another grows behind her, and every denial becomes proof she knows exactly what is being said. In my first life, I had fed the machine like a fool. I had corrected tiny details because I still believed truth worked like a classroom answer key. If you showed the mistake clearly enough, reasonable people would change their marks. I didn't say Maya faked it. I wasn't even in the well-being office that day. I never reported the party. I only knew about it because people posted videos. I didn't tell Mrs. Callan anything about anyone's parents. I went to her because my brother was in hospital. Each correction gave the rumor a new room to enter. By afternoon, people knew I saw the counselor. By Friday, they knew about my brother's hospitalization. By Monday, that had been twisted into Mara uses sad family stuff, so teachers trust her. The first life taught me that a rumor does not need truth to survive. It only needs movement. This time, I intended to let it move all the way into the open. Tessa shifted, uncomfortable with my calm. "You're not going to say it's false?" she asked. Would that matter? Her cheeks colored. She had the grace to look away. "I just thought you should know." "Thank you," I said, and meant it in the strangest way. Then I walked out of the bathroom without fixing the rumor, without finding Maya, without messaging Juniper, without doing any of the panic things that had ruined me faster the first time. In my blazer pocket, my fingers closed around a folded yellow note I had written before school, after waking in the past with my heart punching my ribs. It had only 4 words on it. Let them say it. St. Clementine's College looked almost gentle in the morning rain, which was how it fooled parents during enrollment tours. The sandstone chapel glowed honey gold, the jacarandas dropped purple flowers over the courtyard, and the windows of the senior block reflected the sky so cleanly you could forget how many girls had cried behind them. It was a school that used words like character, service, sisterhood, and resilience until they became wallpaper. In my first life, I had believed those words. That was one reason the rumor destroyed me so completely. I thought sisterhood meant someone would pause before repeating something cruel. I thought character meant teachers could tell the difference between guilt and terror. I thought service meant the counselor's office was safe. Mrs. Callan, the school counselor, had been the only adult I trusted that year. She had a low voice, silver hoops, and a way of letting silence sit without making it punishment. I went to her because my brother Eli had been diagnosed with a heart condition, because Mum was sleeping in hospital chairs, because Dad had started checking the mailbox like bills were wild animals. I did not tell anyone that in the first life until the rumor forced it out of me. That was the second violation. The lie did not only take my reputation, it dragged my private grief into fluorescent hallways and let people step over it. But there was one thing I had discovered too late. On the day the rumor peaked, Mrs. Callan had come into our health and society class to run a session on rumor ethics and source tracing. The whole class had been recorded for training and documentation because St. Clementine's had been under review after a separate bullying complaint. She had announced it at the start. Everyone had signed a media and well-being consent form earlier that term. In my first life, I panicked as soon as she began asking questions and shouted that everyone was lying before they could repeat the details. The recording captured my distress, not their contradictions. The school called the rumor unsubstantiated and encouraged restorative conversation. In other words, nothing. This time, I would let Mrs. Callan press record and give every liar enough rope to decorate the ceiling. Homeroom was where I saw the first version mutate. Juniper sat beside me, as she always did, but her bag was angled away from mine. That small rotation hurt more than Tessa's words. Juniper and I had been friends since year 7 camp, when she cried during the high ropes course and I climbed down to sit with her on the platform until a teacher rescued us both. She was clever, anxious, funny in private, and terrified of being disliked in public. In my first life, I blamed her for not believing me fast enough. Older me understands that fear makes cowards of people who are not cruel, but understanding does not erase the bruise. She looked at me 3 times before the roll was marked. On the 4th, she whispered, "Mara, can I ask you something?" I kept my eyes on the notice board. "You can." "Did you tell Mrs. Callan about Maya's panic attack?" There it was. Not accusation yet. Not trust either. A doorway with a cracked frame. In the first life, I lunged through it and injured us both. "What exactly did you hear?" I asked. Juniper frowned. "That you said Maya exaggerated because she wanted extensions." "Who said I said that?" "I don't know." "Then find out before you ask me to answer it." Her face closed like I had slapped her. Maybe I had, but I could not afford to become the emergency service for everyone's moral uncertainty. Our homeroom teacher, Mr. Vale, began announcements before she could reply. Behind us, 2 girls whispered, "She's acting so cold," and guilty people always get technical. I wrote both sentences in the margin of my planner. Not because I needed to remember the hurt, because this time I was treating the room like evidence. By second period, the rumor had grown teeth. It was no longer only Maya. Now I had supposedly told Mrs. Callan that Lockheed Trans sold vape pods behind the gym, that Priya D'Souza's parents were separating, and that Sienna Pike had copied her English essay from her cousin. The genius of it was that each lie touched something partly real, something people were afraid of, something they would defend by attacking me before checking the source. Lockheed did vape behind the gym, though half the year knew that. Priya's parents were separating, but she had only told 2 friends. Sienna probably had copied an essay, but the only proof was her sudden ability to quote a novel she had never opened. Whoever started this rumor knew exactly which secrets to bundle around my name. They made me sound not just cruel, but dangerous to know. In biology, Lockheed kicked the back of my chair and murmured, "Snitches get lonely." I did not turn around. He kicked again. "You writing that down for your counselor boyfriend?" A few people laughed. The teacher told him to stop without asking what he meant. I wrote the time in my planner, 10:18. Lockheed threat, teacher heard tone, but not content. In the first life I had spun around and hissed, "Leave me alone." And then I was the disruption. This time, I raised my hand. "Miss, can I move seats?" Lockheed is kicking my chair. My voice was flat, almost boring. Boring is underrated. Boring makes cruelty visible because it removes the entertainment. Miss Granger sighed but moved me to the front bench. Lockheed muttered something else, too low to catch. I caught it anyway. "Counselor Rat." I wrote that down too. My notes looked petty, but by now I knew pettiness repeated becomes pattern, and pattern written becomes harder to bury. The first pattern interruption came at recess, when Maya approached me herself. In my first life, Maya avoided me for 3 days, then finally cornered me near the chapel and asked how I could say something so disgusting after knowing what panic felt like. I had cried so hard I could not answer properly. This time, she found me behind a library, where I had gone specifically because it was quiet but visible from the staff room windows. Maya was small, sharp-faced, with dark curls she always tied too tightly when stressed. Her panic attack had happened during a maths test the previous week. I had not been in the room. I had only heard afterward that she collapsed by the door and Mrs. Callan walked her to well-being. Maya stopped 2 meters away from me, arms folded like armor. "Did you say it?" she asked.
No greeting. No softness.
Her eyes were red-rimmed, and suddenly my strategy felt cruel. Let the rumor spread. Easy to write on paper. Harder when the person most wounded by it stood in front of you. I wanted to rush to her. To say no, never. I know what fear does to your lungs. I know what it is like to be treated as dramatic when your body is attacking itself. Instead, I breathed once. "Maya, I did not say you faked your panic attack." Her face trembled. "Then why are people saying you did?" "Because someone wants you angry before you ask who benefited from saying it." That landed. Her eyes narrowed. "That sounds like a speech." "It's not. It's a warning." "Who started it?" "I'm trying to find out." "You're trying?" Her voice cracked. "Mara, people are laughing about me again." That pierced through every layer of planning. "I'm sorry," I said. "You should not have been dragged into this. But you're letting it happen." For a few more hours. She stared at me like I was insane. Maybe I was. Rebirth makes patience look monstrous to people still living the first version of the day. "Health class," I said quietly. "Mrs. Callan is coming in. Ask where each version came from. Don't defend me. Ask for sources." Maya's anger faltered into confusion. "Why?" "Because liars hate maps." She looked at me for a long second, then walked away without forgiving me.
Fair.
I had not earned it yet. By lunch, Juniper had chosen the safe middle, which is a polite way of saying she sat with people who were discussing me and did not stop them. I watched from the courtyard steps while she laughed too brightly at something Sienna said, her shoulders tight with guilt. In the first life, that sight had sent me into the bathroom, where I sobbed so loudly a year 8 asked if she should get a teacher. This time, I ate half my sandwich and let myself feel the betrayal without obeying it. That was another thing the first life taught me. Emotions are weather, not instructions. Across the courtyard, the rumor's source finally revealed her outline. Not her face yet. Her outline. Sienna Pike stood near the drinking fountains, phone in hand, surrounded by girls who looked thrilled and horrified in equal measure. Sienna was not the most popular girl in our year, which made her more dangerous. Popular girls are visible. Everyone knows they have power. Sienna operated in the second circle, close enough to hear secrets, far enough to deny influence. She ran the class group chats, organized birthday collections, volunteered to check on people, and remembered personal details with the accuracy of a predator pretending to be thoughtful. In my first life, I had not suspected her until months later, when someone admitted Sienna was the first person to say I had been seen leaving Mrs. Callan's office right before Maya got called in. The timeline was false, but believable. Sienna's gift was not invention. It was arrangement. She placed facts beside lies until they looked related. That day, as she spoke near the fountains, I saw Juniper lean in. Then Juniper looked over at me, guilt flashing across her face like lightning. I stood, threw the rest of my sandwich away, and did nothing. Not yet. Health and society was last period, because schools have a cruel instinct for scheduling emotional disasters when everyone is tired. We filed into room 3B after lunch, the air thick with deodorant, rain humidity, and the rotten excitement of students expecting confrontation. Mrs. Callan was already there. She stood at the front beside our teacher, Ms. Rourke, with a small black recorder clipped to her lanyard and a laptop open on the desk. Seeing her nearly broke me. In the first life, I had felt betrayed by her too, not because she started the rumor, but because she could not stop it fast enough. Older me knows counselors are not magicians. 17-year-old me had needed her to be one. Mrs. Callan looked around the room, her gaze pausing briefly on me, then on Maya, then on Sienna. She knew. Maybe not all of it, but enough. Before we begin, she said, I want to remind you that today's session is part of our well-being review. As outlined in the consent form signed at the start of term, this class discussion will be audio recorded for documentation and staff follow-up. The recording will not be shared with students. If you do not wish to speak, you may pass. There it was. The sentence that had arrived too late in my memory because fear had drowned it. Around the room, students barely reacted. Most had heard, recorded, and translated it as adult background noise. Sienna glanced at the recorder, then away. She did not look worried. Of course not. She thought recording protected her because she never said the ugliest thing first. She let others carry it. Mrs. Callan clicked something on her laptop. A tiny red light appeared on the recorder. Today, she said, we are going to talk about rumor pathways. Not feelings first. Pathways first. Where did a claim begin? How did it travel? And what changed as it moved? The room went quiet in a way that was almost delicious. Ms. Rourke looked uncomfortable, which told me she had not expected the session to be this direct. Mrs. Callan wrote 3 columns on the board: claim, source, evidence. I am aware, she continued, that a rumor has been circulating today involving my office, Maya's well-being, and Mara Ellis. My name on her mouth made every head turn. I kept my face still. We are not here to shame anyone for hearing a rumor, she said. Hearing is not the same as spreading. We are here to examine responsibility once information reaches us. She turned to the class. Who can state one version of what they heard without adding commentary? Silence. Students love rumors until an adult asks them to hold one up by the tail. Finally, Lockie leaned back in his chair and said, People said Mara told you Maya faked her panic attack. Mrs. Callan wrote it exactly. Mara told Counselor Maya faked panic attack. Thank you. What is your source? Lockie's smirk weakened. Just people. Name the person you heard it from. I don't want to dog anyone. Then say, I choose not to identify my source. That is also data. He frowned.
Fine.
I heard it from Callum. Callum sat up. Bro, I heard it from you. A ripple of laughter moved through the room. Mrs. Callan did not smile. She wrote both names with arrows. Lockie Callum? Callum Lockie? This is why pathways matter, she said. Memory becomes convenient when accountability appears. My hands were folded under the desk so nobody could see my fingers shaking. Not from fear this time. From the strange, fierce relief of watching the rumor become a diagram instead of a fog. Mrs. Callan continued with unbearable patience. Callum, what exact words did you hear? Callum scratched his neck. That Mara said Maya wanted special treatment. Maya's face went white. Mrs. Callan wrote, wanted special treatment. From whom? Sienna said people were saying it. Every eye moved to Sienna. Sienna's face arranged itself into wounded confusion, so smoothly, I almost admired the muscle memory. I never said it like that. Mrs. Callan turned to her. What did you say? I said I heard Mara might have mentioned Maya's test incident in well-being, and that maybe it got misunderstood. Beautiful.
Soft.
Elastic. A sentence with exits. Mrs. Callan wrote it word for word. Who did you hear that from? I don't remember. You remembered enough to repeat it. A tiny sound escaped Juniper beside me. Sienna's cheeks flushed. I was worried about Maya. Maya laughed once bitterly. You didn't talk to me. I didn't want to upset you. So you told everyone else? Ms. Rourke started to intervene, but Mrs. Callan lifted one hand slightly. Let it breathe, the gesture said. Let the contradiction speak. Sienna's eyes shone. This is unfair. I'm being blamed for something everyone heard. Not blamed, Mrs. Callan said. Mapped. The word changed the temperature. Blame is emotional. Mapping is surgical. Sienna looked at the recorder again, and for the first time, she seemed to notice the red light. Then came the second pattern interruption. Priya D'Souza stood up. She was not supposed to. She was not part of my plan, not someone I had considered central, and in the first life, she had remained silent until weeks later. Now she pushed back her chair so hard it scraped. Can I say something? Mrs. Callan nodded. Priya's voice shook, but she did not sit down. Someone said Mara told you about my parents.
That is also going around.
I want to know who said that because I only told Juniper and Sienna. Juniper flinched like she had been slapped. Sienna went completely still. Mrs. Callan wrote a second claim on the board. Mara told counselor about Priya's parents.
Thank you, Priya.
Who heard this version? 3 hands lifted slowly. Then 5. Then, after a pause, Maya's. Mrs. Callan pointed to one girl. Source? Tessa. Tessa said, I heard it from Sienna, but she said not to repeat it. The class made a sound like a curtain tearing. Sienna snapped. I said I was worried because Mara has been going to well-being a lot and suddenly people's private stuff is reaching teachers. There it was. The architecture. My counseling visits plus other people's secrets plus teacher awareness equals Mara the informant. Sienna had not needed proof. She had needed proximity. Mrs. Callan's face remained calm, but her voice cooled. To clarify, you used your knowledge that Mara accessed well-being support to suggest she was the source of unrelated private information? Sienna's mouth opened.
Closed.
Opened again.
No.
I mean, it looked suspicious. Mrs. Callan wrote. It looked suspicious. Then she asked, how did you know Mara accessed well-being support? The question dropped like a stone into deep water. Nobody moved. My heartbeat filled my ears. In the first life, this was the part one had accidentally revealed myself, shouting that I only went to Mrs. Callan because of Eli. This time, the question belonged to the adult in charge. Sienna's eyes flicked toward Juniper. Juniper looked ill. Mrs. Callan waited. Waiting is a skill. Most people rush to fill silence and call it kindness. Mrs. Callan let silence become a witness. Finally, Juniper whispered. I told her. The room turned. My chest hurt so sharply I nearly gasped. I had suspected, but suspicion and hearing are different injuries. Juniper's eyes filled with tears. I didn't mean it like gossip. Mara said she had an appointment once when we were supposed to study, and Sienna asked if she was okay, and I said she was seeing Mrs. Callan because of family stuff. I didn't say details. Family stuff. 2 words that had fed a monster. In my first life, I had screamed at her in the hallway 2 days later, and she had screamed back that she was only trying to protect me. The friendship never recovered. This time, I stared at the desk until the wood grain blurred. Mrs. Callan said gently, Juniper, did Mara give you permission to share that she was accessing counseling? Juniper shook her head. No. Did she give you permission to describe why? No. Thank you for answering honestly. Sienna exhaled, almost relieved to have another body in the circle of guilt. Then Mrs. Callan turned back to her. Juniper's mistake may explain how you learned Mara used well-being support. It does not explain why you connected that to Maya's panic attack, Priya's parents, Laki's vaping, or Sienna's essay. A few people looked confused at Sienna's essay being placed beside her own name. Sienna did not. Her eyes sharpened into panic. Mrs. Callan moved to the third claim. Who heard that Mara reported Sienna for academic misconduct? This one spread faster. Hands went up across the room. Sienna sat frozen as her own rumor returned to bite her. Source? Mrs. Callan asked. Lucky. Callum.
Tessa.
Juniper said Sienna was stressed about English. Juniper looked like she wanted the floor to open. Mrs. Callan drew arrows until the board looked like a crime wall without the red string. Every path curved back toward the same cluster. Sienna, Lucky, Callum, Tessa, then outward. Sienna, Mrs. Callan said, did you tell students that Mara had reported your English essay? No. Did you tell students you were worried she might? Maybe. Why? Sienna's voice rose. Because she knew. Knew what? That I got help. From whom? My cousin. Was the work submitted as your own? Ms. Rourke inhaled sharply. Sienna realized too late that she had dragged her own secret into the room while trying to bury me under it. Pattern interruption, brutal and unplanned. She pointed at me suddenly. This is what she does. She sits there all quiet and makes people say things. She wanted this. That accusation, strange as it was, almost made me smile. The truth had become so uncomfortable that my silence looked like an attack. Mrs. Callan said, "Mara has not spoken in this session except to pass when invited." That was true. She had asked me at the beginning if I wanted to respond, and I had said, "Pass for now." Those 3 words saved me. In the first life, my voice had become the center of the recording. In this life, the recording belonged to them. Maya raised her hand. Her face was still pale, but something in her posture had changed. "I want to say something." Mrs. Callan nodded. Maya turned slightly, not toward me, but toward the class. "I had a panic attack in maths. I was embarrassed. I didn't want people talking about it. Whoever used it to make Mara look bad also made everyone talk about me, and that's disgusting." Her voice broke on the last word. Nobody laughed. Nobody moved. Sienna looked down, but Mrs. Callan's recorder caught silence too. Maya continued, softer now. "I don't know if Mara and I are okay, because she let me be angry today and didn't explain everything. But I believe she didn't say that about me." My throat closed. It was not forgiveness, but it was the first handhold on a cliff.
Priya spoke next.
"I believe she didn't say it about my parents either." Then, unexpectedly, Laki muttered, "Yeah, the vaping thing was obviously not from her. Everyone knows." Mrs. Callan gave him a look. "That does not make the rumor acceptable." "I know," he said, which was probably the most growth Laki had achieved since primary school. Juniper had not spoken again. Tears rolled down her face silently. I did not comfort her. Not because I hated her. Because some guilt needs to sit unsupported long enough to become responsibility. Mrs. Callan finally turned to me. "Mara, would you like to respond to any claim made today?" The room held its breath. In the first life, I had spent all my strength answering fragments, denying scraps, bleeding privacy into the open because I thought transparency would save me. This time, I stood slowly. My knees shook under the desk, but my voice held. I did not tell Mrs. Callan that Maya faked her panic attack. I did not report Priya's parents, Laki's vaping, or Sienna's essay. I did not share anyone's private information from well-being, because I do not have anyone's private information from well-being. I went to counseling for my own reasons, and those reasons were not public property. I looked at Juniper when I said that. She flinched, but did not look away.
Good.
Today I did not correct every version because last time, I stopped. Last time. Dangerous. I swallowed and changed the path. Because I knew if I chased every lie, people would remember my panic more than the source. So I waited for the source to show itself. Sienna scoffed weakly. "That's manipulative." I looked at her then. Really looked.
No.
It's what people do when telling the truth immediately has never protected them. The room went still. Mrs. Callan did not interrupt. "If you heard the rumor and repeated it, you helped hurt Maya, Priya, me, and probably others. If you heard it and stayed quiet because it was easier, you helped too. I'm not saying that because I want everyone punished. I'm saying it because rumors only feel invisible when nobody draws the map." I sat down before my voice could break. For once, the silence after I spoke did not feel like rejection. It felt like impact. The bell rang 2 minutes later, but Mrs. Callan did not let anyone rush out. "Before you leave," she said, "write on the slip in front of you one version of the rumor you heard, who you heard it from, and whether you repeated it. This is not anonymous. It is confidential for follow-up." Groans rose, then died under her expression. This was the part one had never reached in the first life. Written records. Names. Arrows turned into accountability. Students bent over their slips. Some wrote quickly, relieved to confess before being named. Others stared at the paper as if it were a trap, which it was, but only for the version of themselves that wanted gossip, without fingerprints. Juniper's pen shook so badly, I could hear it tapping. Sienna wrote one sentence, crossed it out, wrote another. Mrs. Callan collected every slip by hand. When she reached me, she paused. "Thank you," she said quietly. 2 words. Not enough for everything. Enough for that moment. Sienna stood as soon as she was dismissed and tried to leave with her usual group, but nobody formed around her properly. That was the first visible consequence. Not punishment. Distance. People stepped half a pace away, suddenly afraid of being part of her arrows. She looked smaller without the cloud of borrowed voices. In the hallway, Tessa caught up to me. "Mara," she said, breathless.
I'm sorry. I didn't know it was like that.
I wanted to ask why not knowing had not stopped her. Instead, I said, "Now you do." She nodded, cheeks red, and let me pass. The formal consequences took longer, because schools love procedures almost as much as they love pretending procedures are the same as justice. But by the next morning, the rumor had stopped moving in its original shape. It did not disappear. Rumors never vanish cleanly. They shed skin. Now people whispered about the class recording, the source map, Sienna accidentally admitting essay help, Juniper sharing my counseling appointment, Lockie naming Callum, Callum blaming Lockie, Maya saying the rumor hurt her too. For once, complexity protected me. Nobody could compress the story into "Mara snitched" without someone else saying, "No, Mrs. Callan has the recording." That phrase became a locked door. The counselor has the recording. It was almost funny how fast courage appeared when an adult had proof. Students who had ignored me yesterday now offered awkward smiles. Priya sat beside me in chemistry and said, "For what it's worth, I'm sorry I believed even 5% of it." "Thank you," I said. Maya did not sit with me, but she nodded across the courtyard. That nod mattered more than half the apologies. Juniper avoided me until lunch, then found me near the chapel steps, crying before she spoke. "I told Sienna about Mrs. Callan," she said. "I know. I thought she was worried about you." "I know. That doesn't make it okay." "No." She wiped her face with her sleeve, looking younger than 17. "I'm sorry I asked which parts were true. I was scared of being on the wrong side." "You were," I said. Her face crumpled. I did not soften it. Then I added, "But you can move." That was the closest thing to forgiveness I could offer. Maybe the beginning of it. Maybe not. Sienna's undoing arrived not through a dramatic confession, but through paperwork, which felt appropriate for someone who had weaponized vagueness. Mrs. Callan's recording, the written slips, and follow-up interviews showed that Sienna had introduced 3 separate claims using the same structure. I'm not saying it's true, but I heard Mara, she had used concern as a glove so her fingerprints would not show. She had told Tessa that Maya's panic attack was maybe part of why Mara was always at well-being. She had told Lucky that someone quiet and teacher-friendly had mentioned vaping. She had told Juniper that people were wondering whether Mara collected secrets. Then she watched the class do the uglier work for her. The school issued consequences: removal from the peer mentor program, a formal bullying record, mandatory restorative preparation before any conversation with affected students, and an academic review of her English essay because she had volunteered too much while trying to bury me. That last part became legendary. Priya called it self-reporting with accessories. Sienna's parents appealed, of course. Her mother said Sienna was socially anxious and sometimes over-explains. Her father said recording a class discussion was invasive, despite having signed the consent form himself. Mrs. Callan and Deputy Head Mercer held the line. The recording did not lie. Or rather, it recorded every lie so clearly that even expensive parental outrage had nowhere elegant to stand. My own repair was quieter. Mrs. Callan called me into her office the next week, and for a moment, standing outside the frosted glass door, I was back in the first life, ashamed, exposed, afraid that entering that room would give people another weapon. Then the door opened and she said, "Mara, you are allowed to receive support even when people misuse the fact that you receive it." I cried before I sat down. Not pretty crying. Not movie crying. The kind that folds your whole face. She placed a tissue box within reach and did not speak until I could breathe. "I should have noticed the pathway earlier," she said. "I should have been more careful after students began connecting your name to my office." Adults apologize differently when they do not expect children to rescue them from guilt. Mrs. Callan did not say, "But you understand." She did not say, "We were all doing our best." She said, "I am sorry." I told her about Eli then, not because the rumor forced me to, but because I chose to. I told her how hospital corridors smelled like antiseptic and vending machine coffee, how Mom texted updates with too many exclamation marks, how Dad had started sleeping with his phone under his pillow. The words stayed in the room. That was the miracle. They did not grow legs and run to the courtyard. They did not become arrows on a board. Privacy, I realized, is not silence. It is choosing who gets to hold the truth. Weeks passed, and the school slowly found a new scandal because teenagers require fresh weather. Sienna became quieter, though not kinder. Lockie stopped kicking chairs. Tessa began fact-checking with the intensity of a girl trying to outrun her own embarrassment. Maya and I built something cautious, not friendship exactly, but mutual recognition. Juniper and I did not go back to the way we were. That was another truth rebirth taught me. Not every saved relationship returns to its old shape, and sometimes that is the saving. We studied together again, but I no longer gave her automatic access to every fragile part of me. She earned pieces back slowly. When she asked how Eli was, she did not ask in public. When Sienna's name came up, she did not perform outrage to cleanse herself. She simply said, "I should have protected your privacy," and then changed her behavior. That mattered. The rumor had made me crueler in some ways, or maybe just more exact. I stopped confusing apology with repair. I stopped rewarding people for feeling bad about wounds they had not helped close. I also stopped being ashamed of seeing Mrs. Callan. Once a week, I walked into her office during study period with my head up. The first time someone stared, I stared back until they looked away. By the third week, nobody bothered. Visibility, when chosen, can become armor. The final public turn came at the end of term well-being assembly. In the first life, assemblies after harm had always felt like theater staged for parents. Be kind, speak up, support each other, then back to the same corridors. This one felt different because Mrs. Callan refused to speak in slogans. She stood at the lectern with the same black recorder clipped to her lanyard, though I doubted it was on, and displayed a simple diagram on the screen. Claims source evidence impact. No names.
No gossip. No dramatic retelling.
Just the anatomy of a rumor. Many students think harm begins when a false claim is invented, she said. Often, harm begins later, when someone who does not know decides to repeat it anyway. The hall was silent. Sienna stared at her shoes. Tessa sat rigid. Juniper looked straight ahead. Maya, 2 rows in front of me, did not shrink when panic attacks were mentioned generally.
I was proud of her for that.
Mrs. Callan continued, saying "I heard" does not remove responsibility. Saying "everyone knows" is not evidence. Saying "I was worried" does not justify exposing someone's private support. That sentence moved through the hall like a blade wrapped in velvet. Then Deputy Head Mercer announced a new rumor reporting process, clearer confidentiality rules around well-being visits, and consequences for using counseling access as social ammunition. Was it perfect?
No.
Schools love policies because policies look like solutions even when culture is slower to change. But it was something. A locked door where there had been fog. After assembly, Sienna approached me near the lockers. For one reckless second, I thought she might apologize properly. She did not. "You must be happy," she said. Her voice was flat, stripped of the honey she used in groups. I closed my locker. "Not really. You got everyone to hate me."
No.
"I let everyone hear you." Her jaw tightened. "You planned it." I waited. Same thing. I looked at her for a long moment, at the girl who had used my counseling visits, Maya's panic, Priya's family, and half the year's fear as ingredients in a reputation fire. "No," I said. "Planning is when you build a lie and send it through other people so they burn their hands instead of you. Waiting is when you stop putting yourself out to protect the person who lit it." Her eyes flashed. "You think you're better than me?"
No.
"I think I'm done being useful to you." That sentence felt familiar in my mouth, like something many girls eventually learn to say in different ways. Sienna looked past me, searching for an audience. There was none close enough to save her. She walked away. I watched her go, without triumph. The best revenge was not her loneliness, though I would not pretend it did not satisfy a tired corner of me. The best revenge was that I no longer needed her to admit what she had done in order to know it was real. Eli came home from hospital the following month. That had not happened so cleanly in the first life. Stress had blurred everything, my attention split between school panic and family fear. This time, when Mum brought him through the front door with his overnight bag and his ridiculous dinosaur slippers, I was present enough to laugh before crying. He looked thinner, annoyed by everyone's concern, and alive in a way that made the whole house breathe differently. I told him a sanitized version of the rumor, leaving out the ugliest parts because he was 13 and did not need my school war as welcome home entertainment. He listened from the couch, then said, "So, basically she got ratioed by a counselor." I stared at him. "You almost died, and still talk like the internet raised you." He grinned. "Did she deserve it?"
I thought about that.
"She deserved to be stopped." "That's not what I asked. It's the answer I'm giving." He rolled his eyes and asked for soup. Later that night, after everyone slept, I found the yellow note still in my blazer pocket. Let them say it. I unfolded it at my desk. The paper had softened at the creases. I added a second line underneath. Then make them name the source. I pinned it above my study lamp, not as a reminder to become suspicious of everyone, but as a reminder that truth needs structure when lies have momentum. By the end of the year, my name no longer caused conversations to stop. That sounds small, unless you have lived inside the opposite. I rebuilt my place slowly, not by becoming universally loved, but by becoming difficult to casually harm. People learned that if they brought me something they heard, I would ask who said it, when, where, and whether they had repeated it. Some found that intimidating. Good. Kindness, without boundaries, had nearly made me a public landfill for other people's fear. I still made mistakes. Sometimes I was too cold. Sometimes I treated uncertain friends like potential witnesses instead of people. Mrs. Callan helped me with that. Documentation is a tool, she reminded me once, not a home. She was right. I did not want to live forever inside evidence. I wanted laughter behind the library, lunch without scanning faces, friendships that did not require footnotes. Some days I got those things. Some days I did not. Healing is inconsistent. Reputation, once cracked, does not become seamless again, but it can become stronger at the repaired places if the right pressure is applied. If I had stopped the rumor in the bathroom that morning, maybe I would have saved myself an hour of pain. Maybe Tessa would have believed me. Maybe Maya would have softened sooner. Maybe. But the source would have remained hidden, the pathways blurred, the polite poison still circulating under cleaner names. Sienna would have waited, adjusted, and tried again with a sharper lie. In my first life, I fought the smoke until I collapsed, and everyone argued about whether I had coughed too dramatically. In this life, I let the smoke fill the room just long enough for Mrs. Callan to switch on the lights and show where the fire began. That is the part people misunderstand about letting a rumor spread. It is not passive. It is not weakness. It is controlled exposure. It is refusing to spend your whole soul chasing whispers in corners when you know a recorded room is waiting. Sienna thought every lie became safer once enough mouths carried it. She never understood that repetition can also create a trail. Lockie thought everyone says meant nobody was responsible. Juniper thought sharing one private detail out of concern was harmless. Tessa thought repeating with wide eyes was not the same as spreading. They all learned otherwise, not because I shouted louder, but because Mrs. Callan recorded every lie in class and asked the only question rumors truly fear. Who told you? So yes, the second time I heard the rumor about myself, I let it spread. I let it walk into biology, sit in the courtyard, wrap itself around Maya's hurt, Priya's family, Lockie's guilt, Juniper's fear, and Sienna's careful little smile. I let it become ugly enough that nobody could call it concern anymore. I let the class say the names, draw the arrows, contradict themselves, and discover that I heard is not a hiding place when a red recording light is blinking. And when it was finally my turn to speak, I did not beg to be believed. I simply stood in the middle of the map they had made and told the truth once. That was enough. Not because truth had become magical, but because this time it had witnesses, timestamps, sources, and silence where my panic used to be. The first life taught me that rumors can steal your voice. The second taught me you do not always get it back by screaming. Sometimes you get it back by waiting until every liar has finished speaking.